The bark that changed everything. It was a morning like any other in Mill Creek, a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Blue Pine Lake, a serene body of water that had been a part of my life since childhood, shimmered under the soft glow of the rising sun. I was out for my usual morning walk with Max, my golden retriever, who was more like a best friend than a pet. Max was the kind of dog who loved belly rubs and lazy afternoons, always calm and composed. But that morning, something was different. As we approached the lake, Max suddenly froze. His ears perked up, his tail stiffened, and his body went rigid. Before I could react, he bolted toward the water's edge, barking furiously. His barks were sharp, desperate, and unlike anything I'd ever heard from him before. It was as if he was trying to tell me something urgent. "Max, what is it, boy?" I called out, my voice tinged with concern. He didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the water. His paws dug into the damp earth, and his barks grew louder, more frantic. I scanned the lake, but it looked as peaceful as ever. The water was calm, reflecting the soft hues of the morning sky. There were no boats, no swimmers, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, Max's behavior was anything but ordinary. My heart began to race. Max had never acted like this before. He was usually so predictable, so calm. But now, he was a different dog altogether. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a gnawing sense that something wasn't right. I knelt beside him, trying to calm him down, but he wouldn't budge. His barks echoed across the lake, sharp and insistent. "Is someone down there, Max?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I reached for my phone and dialed the local authorities. The dispatcher, Linda, answered promptly. I explained the situation, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm at Blue Pine Lake, and my dog, he's acting like there's something in the water. Something big. I think you should send someone." Linda hesitated. "Are you sure it's not just a fish or a log?" she asked. "No way," I replied firmly. "Max has never acted like this. Please, just send someone." 15 minutes later, the distant wail of a siren broke the morning silence. Officer Greg Williams arrived, his tall frame and skeptical expression instantly recognizable. He stepped out of his patrol car, his eyes scanning the scene. "What's going on, Ryan?" he asked, his tone calm but cautious. I gestured toward Max, who was still fixated on the water. "I don't just think there's something in the lake, Greg. I know. Look at him. He won't budge. Something's wrong." Greg sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, let's take a look." He radioed in a request for the local dive team. By then, a small crowd had started to gather, locals out for their morning routines, curious about the commotion. Mrs. Parker from the bakery, an older couple who walked their terrier by the lake every morning, and a few joggers all watched as Max continued his desperate barking. When the dive team arrived, they wasted no time suiting up. They asked me a few questions, what I saw, what Max was reacting to, anything that might help. But I had nothing concrete, just a gut feeling and a dog who refused to leave the spot. The first diver, Chris, adjusted his mask and gave a thumbs up before stepping into the water. The second diver, Rachel, followed soon after. They disappeared beneath the surface, and the lake was still again, except for Max's restless pacing. Minutes passed, then more. My palms began to sweat as the crowd murmured nervously. Officer Williams shifted uncomfortably, clearly wondering if this was a waste of time. But I knew Max. I trusted him more than anything. And then, a loud gasp from one of the divers broke the silence. Rachel surfaced, pulling off her mask. "We found something," she said, her voice tense. The air around us turned electric. Everyone rushed closer, their eyes wide with anticipation. "What is it?" I called out, my heart pounding. Rachel took a deep breath. "You're not going to believe this. "There's a car down there, and someone's inside." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Officer Williams' face went stiff. "A car?" he repeated. "How long has it been down there?" "It's hard to say," Chris responded as he surfaced next to Rachel. "It looks like it's been there a while. We need to call in a recovery team." I glanced down at Max. His ears were perked up, but his stance was no less tense. He had been right. He had known. "Is the person inside?" I hesitated, not sure I wanted the answer. Rachel looked grim. "We can't tell yet. We didn't get close enough. But it's definitely occupied." Williams was already calling in more backup. "All right, everyone. Step back. Let's get this under control." The crowd obeyed, but nobody left. I stood rooted to the ground, watching as more emergency personnel arrived. It took another hour before they managed to pull the vehicle up from the depths of the lake. The rusty blue sedan emerged, water cascading from its broken windows, algae clinging to its sides. A collective hush fell over the spectators as we all braced for what was inside. The moment the door was pried open, a mixture of relief and horror settled in my chest. The seat was empty. No driver, no body. Just an old, waterlogged interior. "What the?" Williams muttered, peering inside. Chris looked just as confused. The seat belts still buckled. Whoever was in here, they were in the car when it went under. But they're not here now. A shiver ran down my spine. I looked at Max, who had finally stopped barking but remained close by. He hadn't led me to a tragedy. He had led me to a mystery. And something told me this was just the beginning. The mystery deepens. The air around Blue Pine Lake felt heavier now, as if the weight of the discovery had settled over everyone present. The rusty blue sedan sat on the shore, water still dripping from its frame, a silent testament to the secrets it had held for over a decade. The crowd that had gathered earlier had thinned, but a few curious onlookers remained, their whispers carrying across the quiet morning. Officer Williams was busy coordinating with the dive team and the recovery crew, his face a mask of concentration. I stood nearby, my hand resting on Max's head, his fur damp from the morning dew. He was calm now, but his eyes were still fixed on the car, as if he knew the mystery wasn't over. "Ryan," Williams called, pulling me out of my thoughts. "You said Max was acting strange this morning. Can you walk me through it again?" I nodded, recounting the events as clearly as I could. "We were just walking like we always do. Max loves the lake, but he's never acted like this before." He froze, then started barking like crazy. It was like he was trying to tell me something was wrong. I didn't see anything at first, but he wouldn't stop. That's when I called you. Williams scribbled notes in his pad, his brow furrowed. "And you're sure you didn't see anything unusual? No movement in the water, no sounds?" "Nothing," I said. "Just Max. He's never been wrong before. If he says something's there, I believe him." Williams nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "All right. We'll keep you updated. For now, stay close. We might need more information." As he walked away, I knelt beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "Good boy," I murmured. "You did good." He wagged his tail faintly, but his eyes never left the car. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something we hadn't uncovered yet. The recovery team worked methodically, documenting every detail of the car. They took photographs, collected samples of the algae and mud, and carefully inspected the interior. The license plate, though faded and covered in grime, was still legible. Williams had already radioed it in, and the response from dispatch had sent a ripple of unease through the group. "The car belongs to a man named Daniel Whitmore," Williams announced, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "He went missing 12 years ago. His car was never found, and the case went cold." The name didn't ring a bell for me, but the weight of the revelation was palpable. 12 years. That car had been sitting at the bottom of Blue Pine Lake for over a decade, hidden from sight, its secrets buried beneath layers of silt and water. And now, thanks to Max, it had been brought back to the surface. What about the driver? Someone in the crowd asked. Was he in the car? Williams shook his head. The seat was empty, but the seatbelt was still buckled. It's possible he escaped, but we won't know for sure until we investigate further. The thought sent a chill down my spine. If Daniel Whitmore had managed to escape the car, where was he now? Had he survived? And if he had, why hadn't he come forward? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. As the recovery team continued their work, I noticed something odd about the car. The driver's side window was rolled down, just enough for someone to slip through. Rachel, one of the divers, pointed it out to Williams. "Look at this," she said, crouching near the door. "The window's down. If he was inside when the car went under, he could have gotten out." Williams nodded, his expression grim. "That changes things. If he escaped, he might have made it to shore, but why wouldn't he have reported it?" "Maybe he was disoriented," Rachel suggested. "Or injured. The lake's deep, and the water's cold. Hypothermia could have set in quickly." The possibility hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. If Daniel Whitmore had survived, he might have been in no condition to seek help. And if he hadn't, well, that was a thought I didn't want to dwell on. As the morning wore on, the recovery team began to pack up. The car would be taken to the impound lot for further inspection, and the dive team would return to the lake to search for any additional clues. Williams assured me they would keep me in the loop, but I could tell he was as baffled as I was. Before leaving, I took one last look at the car. It was a relic of the past, a piece of someone's life that had been lost for years. And now, thanks to Max, it had been brought back into the light. But the mystery was far from solved. Where was Daniel Whitmore? What had happened that night 12 years ago? And why had Max been so determined to lead us to the car? As I walked away from the lake, Max by my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were answers out there, waiting to be found, and I was determined to find them. Unraveling the past. The days following the discovery of the car at Blue Pine Lake were a whirlwind of activity. News of the find spread quickly through Mill Creek, and soon the quiet town was buzzing with speculation and curiosity. Reporters from nearby towns arrived, their cameras and microphones capturing every detail of the unfolding mystery. Officer Williams and his team worked tirelessly, piecing together what little information they had about Daniel Whitmore and his disappearance 12 years ago. For me, the days were a mix of awe and unease. Max, my ever-loyal golden retriever, had become something of a local hero. People stopped me on the street to ask about him, to pat his head, and to marvel at his uncanny ability to sense something hidden beneath the lake's surface. But while I was proud of Max, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Something deeper, something darker. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch with Max by my side, Officer Williams pulled up in his patrol car. He looked tired, his usual crisp uniform slightly rumpled, but there was a determined glint in his eyes. "Ryan," he said, stepping out of the car, "we need to talk." I gestured for him to sit, and he did, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "We've been digging into Daniel Whitmore's case," he began. "Turns out, he wasn't just a random guy. He was a local businessman, well known in the community, owned a small construction company. When he disappeared, it was big news. But after a while, the leads dried up, and the case went cold." I nodded, listening intently. "What do you think happened to him?" Williams sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's the million-dollar question. The car being in the lake suggests foul play, but without a body, it's hard to say. We've been interviewing people who knew him, friends, family, employees. So far, no one's come forward with anything concrete, but there's one thing that's been bothering me." "What's that?" I asked. "The night he disappeared," Williams said, his voice lowering. "There was a storm. A bad one. Roads were flooded, power lines down. It's possible he was driving near the lake, lost control, and ended up in the water. But here's the thing. His wife reported him missing the next morning. She said he never came home that night. But according to the weather reports, the storm didn't hit until after midnight. So why was he out so late? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. I frowned, trying to piece it together. You think someone might have been with him? Someone who didn't want to be found? Williams shrugged. It's a possibility. We're looking into it. But there's another angle we're exploring. Daniel's business was struggling at the time. He had debts, creditors breathing down his neck. Some people think he might have staged his own disappearance. I raised an eyebrow. You mean he faked his death? It's not unheard of, Williams said. But if that's the case, why leave the car in the lake? Why not make it look like an accident somewhere else? And why hasn't he resurfaced in all these years? The questions were endless, each one leading to more uncertainty. I glanced at Max, who was lying at my feet, his head resting on his paws. He seemed calm now, but I couldn't forget the way he had barked at the lake that morning, as if he knew something we didn't. What about the car? I asked. Did you find anything else inside? Williams nodded. We did. There was a briefcase in the trunk. It was rusted shut, but we managed to open it. Inside were some old documents, contracts, invoices, that kind of thing. Nothing incriminating, but it's a start. We're also analyzing the car's GPS system, if it still works. Maybe it can tell us where he was that night. As Williams spoke, I felt a growing sense of determination. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a puzzle, one that needed to be solved. And while I wasn't a detective, I couldn't shake the feeling that Max and I had a role to play in uncovering the truth. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked. Williams hesitated, then nodded. Actually, yes. We're planning to hold a town meeting tomorrow night. We're hoping someone might come forward with information. Anything, no matter how small. It's a long shot, but it's worth a try. I'd like you to be there. And bring Max. People trust him. And if they see him, they might be more willing to talk. I agreed, and Williams left soon after, his mind clearly still racing with possibilities. That evening, as I sat with Max on the porch, I couldn't help but think about Daniel Whitmore. Who was he? What had happened to him? And why had Max been so determined to lead us to his car? The next night, the town hall was packed. People from all over Mill Creek had come, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Williams stood at the front of the room, his voice steady as he recounted the details of the case. He asked for anyone with information to come forward, no matter how insignificant it might seem. At first, the room was silent. Then, slowly, people began to speak. An older man recalled seeing a car near the lake the night of the storm. A woman mentioned that Daniel had been arguing with someone at the local diner a few days before his disappearance. Each piece of information was small, but together, they began to paint a picture. And then something unexpected happened. A man in the back of the room stood up. He was tall, with graying hair, and a weathered face. I knew Daniel, he said, his voice trembling. We were friends, and there's something I've never told anyone. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Williams stepped forward. Go on, he said gently. The man took a deep breath. The night he disappeared, Daniel called me. He sounded scared. He said he was in trouble, that he needed my help. But before he could tell me more, the line went dead. I tried calling him back, but he never answered. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. I've carried that guilt with me ever since. The revelation sent a ripple through the room. Williams thanked the man, his expression a mix of relief and determination. It was a breakthrough, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing for 12 years. As the meeting ended, I looked down at Max. He was sitting quietly, his eyes scanning the room as if he understood the gravity of what had just happened. I knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. We're getting closer, boy, I whispered. Thanks to you. But even as I said the words, I knew the mystery was far from over. There were still questions, still secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as long as there were answers to find, Max and I would be there, ready to follow the trail wherever it led. The truth beneath the surface. The town meeting had opened a floodgate of memories and confessions, each one adding a new layer to the mystery of Daniel Whitmore's disappearance. Over the next few days, more people came forward with stories, some credible, others less so. But one thing was clear: Daniel's life had been more complicated than anyone had realized. His business troubles, his strained relationships, and the phone call he made the night he vanished all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple accident. Officer Williams and his team worked tirelessly, following every lead, no matter how small. They tracked down old friends, former employees, and even distant relatives, piecing together a timeline of Daniel's final days. Meanwhile, Max and I became unofficial members of the investigation. People in town had taken to calling him the Lake Hero, and his presence seemed to bring a sense of calm to the chaos. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Blue Pine Lake, Williams called me. "Ryan, we need you and Max down at the lake. We found something." My heart raced as I grabbed Max's leash and hurried to the shore. A small crowd had gathered, including divers, police officers, and a few curious onlookers. Williams stood near the water's edge, his face a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "What's going on?" I asked as I approached. Williams pointed to the lake. "We've been searching the area where the car was found, and we came across something else. Well, you'll see." The divers were already in the water, their lights cutting through the dark depths. Max stood beside me, his ears perked up, his tail wagging faintly. He seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. Minutes passed, the tension growing with each second. Then one of the divers surfaced, holding something in his hands. It was a small rusted metal box, its surface covered in algae and mud. He swam to the shore and handed it to Williams, who carefully opened it. Inside was a collection of items: a waterlogged notebook, a set of keys, and a photograph. The picture was faded, but it was unmistakably Daniel Whitmore, standing with a woman and a young child. They were smiling, their arms around each other, a happy family frozen in time. Williams flipped through the notebook, his eyes scanning the pages. "It's a journal," he said, his voice low. "Daniel's journal. He wrote about everything: his business, his debts, his fears, and his plans." "Plans?" I asked, my stomach tightening. Williams nodded. He knew he was in trouble. He owed money to some dangerous people, and he was afraid for his family. He wrote about staging his disappearance, about leaving everything behind to protect them, but he never got the chance. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. I looked at Max, who was staring at the lake, his body tense. It was as if he knew there was more to the story. "What happened to him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Williams sighed, his shoulders slumping. "We don't know for sure, but based on what we found, it's likely that the people he owed money to caught up with him. They might have forced him into the car, driven it into the lake, and left him there. But Daniel, he fought back. He managed to escape the car, but he didn't make it to shore." The image was heartbreaking. A man desperate to protect his family, only to meet a tragic end. I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at the photograph again. Daniel's smile was so full of life, so full of hope. And now, all that remained of him was a rusted car and a waterlogged journal. Williams closed the box and handed it to one of his officers. "We'll keep digging," he said. "We owe it to Daniel and his family to find out the truth." As the crowd began to disperse, I knelt beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "You did it, boy," I said softly. "You brought him home." Max wagged his tail, his eyes still fixed on the lake. It was as if he knew his job wasn't finished, that there were still secrets buried beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. In the weeks that followed, the investigation continued. Daniel's family was finally given closure, and the people responsible for his disappearance were brought to justice. The town of Mill Creek rallied together, honoring Daniel's memory and vowing to never let such a tragedy happen again. As for Max, he became a symbol of hope and resilience. His story spread far and wide, inspiring people to trust their instincts and to never give up, no matter how deep the mystery. And every time we walked by Blue Pine Lake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for Max, for the truth, and for the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. The lake, once a place of mystery and fear, had become a place of healing. And as the sun set over its calm waters, I knew that Daniel Whitmore's spirit could finally rest in peace. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.